I first met her on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day you don't expect to change anything. My right shoulder had been aching for weeks from long hours at my computer, and my friend had recommended a small wellness clinic tucked behind a row of cafes downtown. The place wasn't fancy, no neon signs or polished glass, just a modest wooden door with the words Clara Reyes, physical therapist, written in soft gold script. When I stepped inside, I was greeted by a calm stillness that instantly made me lower my voice. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and warm oil. A slow instrumental melody played somewhere in the background. And then she appeared from behind a curtain, mid-40s, graceful in the quiet way that draws you in without effort. Her hair was tied loosely at the back, a few strands falling freely against her cheek. She had the kind of composure that made the whole room seem still. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice low and even. "You must be Daniel." I nodded, suddenly aware of how tense my posture was. She gestured for me to sit, her movements measured, deliberate, like she never rushed through anything. As she asked about my pain and how long I'd had it, I found myself studying her face, faint lines near her eyes, a kind softness there that didn't come from pretending to care. When the session began, she dimmed the lights slightly and asked me to lie face down. "Just relax," she murmured. "Breathe normally." Her hands were steady, firm yet careful, moving across my shoulders in slow, circular motions. I could hear the faint sound of oil being warmed between her palms. Each touch was precise, practiced, but not mechanical. It felt attentive, like she was listening through her fingers. At first, I focused on the rhythm, the rise and fall of pressure, the small creaks in the massage table, but soon, my thoughts drifted. Her touch seemed to carry something unspoken, something that wasn't part of her job. Not intention, not flirtation, just presence. A kind of empathy I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Occasionally, she'd ask softly, "Is the pressure okay?" And I'd answer, "Yes, it's perfect," though what I really wanted to say was, "Don't stop." Through half-closed eyes, I saw her expression reflected in the mirror, calm, focused, unaware of what her nearness was doing to me. The scent of lavender oil filled the room. The soft click of the wall clock seemed to slow down. When the session ended, she handed me a glass of water and smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "You'll probably feel lighter tomorrow," she said. I thanked her, trying to keep my voice steady, but something inside me shifted. As I stepped out into the late afternoon light, the city felt strangely quiet, like my mind was still in that room, replaying her voice, her touch, her calm. It was just a massage. Nothing more. And yet, for reasons I couldn't explain, I knew I'd be back. I told myself I booked the second session purely because my shoulder still felt tight, that it was about recovery, not curiosity. But deep down, I knew better. A part of me just wanted to see her again. It was raining when I arrived that evening. The city had that silver, washed-out glow that makes everything feel distant. Inside her clinic, the air was warm and faintly scented with lemongrass and candle wax. The rain outside tapped gently against the window, mingling with the soft hum of jazz coming from a small speaker on the shelf. Clara looked up from her desk and smiled when she saw me. "Daniel," she greeted, her tone effortlessly kind. "You came back." "I think my shoulder missed your magic hands," I said lightly. I meant it as a joke, but the way her eyes softened made my pulse quicken. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You flatter easily for someone who was in pain the last time I saw him." There was something about her voice, calm, assured, but with a quiet warmth underneath, that drew me in. When she asked me to take off my jacket, her fingers brushed the edge of my sleeve, and even that fleeting touch sent a wave of awareness through me. The session began. Her hands pressed into my muscles with a slow rhythm, steady and professional, yet every motion felt personal. I could feel her breath, calm and measured, as she leaned closer to adjust her pressure. The room seemed to shrink around us. The world outside ceased to exist. At one point, I glanced sideways and caught her reflection in the mirror, the concentration in her eyes, the small crease between her brows. She didn't notice me watching, and I quickly looked away, embarrassed by how much I was paying attention to the way her bracelet slid down her wrist, the way her hair swayed slightly as she moved. "Still too tight here," she murmured, pressing her thumb along my shoulder blade. "Maybe I just need an excuse to come back again," I said before thinking. She paused for half a second. Just enough for the air to change. Then, with a small, composed smile, she replied, "Therapy only works if you want to get better." I wanted to tell her that I wasn't sure what better even meant anymore. That lately, it wasn't just the pain in my shoulder that brought me here, it was the quiet, the way she made the world feel still for an hour. But I kept that to myself. When the session ended, she wiped her hands on a towel and handed me a cup of water. "You're improving," she said gently. "But remember, consistency matters." Our fingers brushed as I took the cup. It wasn't intentional, or maybe it was, I couldn't tell. For a second, neither of us moved. I looked up and our eyes met. There was no smile this time, no polite distance. Just a shared awareness, fragile and unspoken. Then she stepped back, clearing her throat. "See you next week, if you'd like," she said. Outside, the rain had stopped, but everything still glistened. I stood under the awning for a while before leaving, the sound of her voice replaying in my head. I told myself it was still innocent, a simple connection between a client and his therapist. But something was already beginning to stir beneath the surface, and I could feel it, that quiet, dangerous warmth between us. By the third appointment, something between us had shifted, subtle, but impossible to ignore. It wasn't about routine anymore. It felt like we were both quietly waiting for the session to end, not because we wanted to leave, but because neither of us knew what to do with the silence that lingered afterward. That afternoon, the clinic was quieter than usual. The curtains were drawn halfway, letting in only muted sunlight that painted the room in shades of amber. When I arrived, Clara was rearranging a few essential oils on a shelf. She turned, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and smiled, that same soft, knowing smile that felt too personal for a professional setting. "How's the shoulder?" she asked. "Better," I replied. "Maybe too much. You're working yourself out of a job." She laughed, but there was a flicker in her expression, something that looked like hesitation. "Well," she said, "I wouldn't mind if you stopped by just for tea instead." I froze for half a second, wondering if she meant it. But she didn't look away. So after the session, when she offered me a cup, I said yes. The massage had left me loose and unguarded. We sat across from each other in her small office, the faint hum of the air conditioner filling the pauses between words. The tea was chamomile, faintly floral, steaming in delicate ceramic cups. For a while, we talked about ordinary things: the weather, the noise of the city, my work. But as the minutes passed, our conversation began to wander into places neither of us had planned to go. She spoke about her divorce, how she had built this clinic from nothing after leaving her marriage. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a kind of tired honesty. "You start over," she said, staring at the steam rising from her tea, "and you think you've moved on. But some days, you realize you're still learning how to be alone." I didn't know what to say, only that I wanted to take that sadness from her somehow. "You don't seem lonely," I said quietly. "You seem peaceful." She smiled faintly. "That's the trick. People see what you let them see." Her words stayed with me. When she looked up, her gaze met mine, calm, searching, unguarded. The room felt smaller then, the distance between us almost non-existent. I don't remember how it happened exactly, maybe when I reached out to pass her the cup, or maybe she did, but our fingers touched. Just a brush, a second too long. Neither of us moved to pull away. The air around us seemed to tighten, heavy with something we couldn't name. Her voice broke the silence, soft but steady. "Daniel, you should go. Before I forget that I'm supposed to be the professional here." There was no anger, only a kind of trembling restraint. I nodded slowly, setting down my cup. "You don't have to be anyone right now," I whispered, but she was already standing, her back turned toward me. As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the mirror, flushed, dazed, caught between guilt and longing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel her touch, not from the massage, but from that single moment when our hands met, and everything else fell away. The next time I saw Clara, the city was caught in a blackout. The power had gone out across several blocks, and I nearly turned back when I saw her clinic in darkness. But the door was unlocked, and her voice called softly from inside, "Daniel? You made it." Candles flickered on every surface, their flames bending gently in the still air. The scent of vanilla and warm oil hung close, blending with the faint rain drifting through an open window. Without the hum of machines or the brightness of lights, the clinic felt different, intimate, almost secret. She stood by the massage table, the golden light casting soft shadows across her face. Her hair was loose this time, falling over her shoulders, and she looked less like a therapist and more like a woman simply caught in a moment. "If you're comfortable," she said, her voice hushed, "we can still continue. The warmth helps relax the muscles." I nodded, trying not to think about how my heart had started racing. As I lay down, I felt the candlelight flicker across my back, warm and uneven. The world outside seemed to disappear, no city sounds, no hum of lights, just the sound of her breathing as she worked. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately, following the familiar pattern across my shoulders and spine. But tonight, every touch felt heightened, sharper somehow. When her fingertips brushed the side of my neck, I couldn't hold it back anymore. I whispered her name. "Clara." She froze. Her hands lingered in place, neither pulling away nor continuing. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain tapping against the window and the faint crackle of candlewick. Then, quietly, she said, "You can't say things you don't mean." "I meant it," I murmured, turning slightly to look at her. "Every time I leave here, I tell myself it's just therapy. But it never is." Her eyes caught mine, hesitant, searching. The candlelight reflected in them like tiny stars trembling in water. She looked down, then exhaled shakily. "You don't understand," she said. "I've built these walls for a reason. I can't afford to let something like this happen." Her voice faltered on the last word, as though even saying it felt dangerous. I sat up slowly, the sheet slipping down my shoulder. For a moment, neither of us moved. The space between us felt charged, every heartbeat, every breath audible. "I don't want to hurt you," I said softly. She shook her head, taking a step back. "No, Daniel. This is exactly how people get hurt." But she didn't look angry. She looked afraid, not of me, but of what she felt. The candle nearest us sputtered, throwing light across her face, the conflict written in every line. She looked at me for one long, suspended second, then whispered, "You should go." I nodded, gathering my things in silence. As I reached the door, she said my name again, barely audible, like she wasn't sure she wanted me to hear it. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air was thick with electricity. I walked home with the smell of lavender and wax still clinging to my skin, my mind replaying the moment her hand paused on my neck, that instant when we both realized we'd crossed a line we could never uncross. After that night, I didn't return to the clinic for weeks. I told myself it was because the pain in my shoulder had finally faded, but the truth was more complicated. Every time I thought of her, the way her hand had stilled on my skin, the tremor in her voice when she said my name, my chest tightened with something I didn't know how to name. Days turned into a strange kind of blur. Work, home, sleep, everything felt muted, like color had drained from the edges of my world. I'd pass the street where her clinic stood and find myself slowing down, eyes flicking toward that wooden door with its soft gold lettering. Sometimes the curtains were drawn, sometimes a faint light glowed behind them. I never went in. Nights were worse. The city would quiet down, and in that silence, I'd hear echoes, the soft scrape of her bracelet against the table, her whisper when she told me to go. I'd replay every second of that evening under candlelight, wondering if she regretted it or if she thought of it at all. One evening, unable to focus, I scrolled through my messages, and there it was, her name in my chat list. We hadn't spoken since that night. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding harder than it should have. And then, as if the universe decided to test me, her message arrived. "Hope your shoulder's better. Take care of your posture." I stared at those words for a long time, so casual, so restrained, and yet full of everything she couldn't say outright. I typed back 3 different replies, deleting each one before I could send it. Finally, I settled on something simple, something that revealed too much and not enough all at once. It's fine now, but I miss the way you made it feel. I hesitated, thumb trembling above the send button, and then I sent it. The moment the message delivered, regret hit me like a wave. I set my phone down and paced the room, replaying how she might read it. Maybe she'd smile sadly. Maybe she'd delete it. Maybe she'd block me altogether. No reply came that night. Or the night after. A week later, I thought I saw her in the grocery store, a figure in a soft gray coat, hair tied back loosely, moving with the same graceful calm I remembered. My breath caught, but when she turned, it wasn't her. I felt foolish for even hoping. That night, I sat by my window with the city lights spread out below, a mug of untouched coffee cooling beside me. For the first time, I wondered if she had built her silence as carefully as she had built her clinic, as protection, not rejection. And somewhere deep down, I realized I didn't want to let go of what we had, even if it was nothing more than unspoken words and the ghost of her touch. Still, longing has a way of turning into resolve. The next morning, I opened my phone, stared at her name again, and whispered to myself, if she doesn't want to see me again, she'll say it. But I need to know. And so, I typed one last message. Can we talk? Then I hit send and waited. 2 days after I sent that message, her reply came, short, cautious, but enough to make my heart race. You can stop by. Just to talk. After hours. I must have read it 10 times, each one leaving me more breathless than the last. That evening, I drove to her clinic under a bruised purple sky. The streets were mostly empty, the air thick with the smell of rain about to fall. When I reached her door, the lights inside were dim, a single lamp casting a golden pool of warmth over the front room. She was there, waiting, hair tied loosely, reading glasses perched low on her nose, a cup of tea cradled between her hands. For a second, she didn't look like the poised therapist I had met months ago. She looked like a woman who had spent the day trying to convince herself she was doing the right thing. You came, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd actually say yes. I almost didn't. She smiled faintly, gesturing toward the couch. Sit. There's no session tonight. No massage. Just honesty. The rain began to fall outside, soft, steady, rhythmic. She poured me tea, and for a while, we said nothing. Just the faint sound of water against glass, and the low hum of the city beyond the walls. Finally, she spoke. I shouldn't have let things get so personal. You came here for help, not confusion. I shook my head. You helped me more than you know. But maybe it wasn't just my shoulder that needed healing. She looked up then, eyes softening. You always say things that make me forget how young you are. I don't feel young around you, I admit it. I just feel seen. She set her cup down slowly. That's dangerous, Daniel. You're looking at me like I'm someone who can give you more than I can. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I just don't want to pretend it meant nothing. Her silence stretched. Then, almost imperceptibly, she reached forward, brushing her thumb along my cheekbone, a hesitant, trembling touch. You have no idea how long it's been since someone looked at me like that, she whispered. Like I wasn't just someone who's rebuilding. My breath caught. Then let me be part of what you're rebuilding. She smiled, a sad, luminous kind of smile. You say that now, but you don't understand what it costs to let someone in after losing everything. The rain outside grew heavier, filling the silence between us. Her hand was still against my face, the warmth of her skin anchoring me in that fragile, impossible moment. I'm not asking for forever, I said softly. Just tonight. Just truth. Her eyes shimmered under the lamplight. Then here's mine, she said. I think about you more than I should. I wish I didn't. She let her hand fall away, the air cooling instantly where her touch had been. Then she whispered, that's all I can give you right now. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. It's enough. When I left that night, the rain had stopped, but the world smelled clean again, like something that had been waiting to start over. The days that followed felt heavier than they should have. We had spoken, crossed a line again, and somehow managed to stop right before the point of no return. But that didn't make it easier, it only made the space between us sharper, more deliberate, almost electric. I still visited the clinic once a week, pretending I needed follow-up therapy, though we both knew the real reason. She kept things professional, crisp greetings, measured touches, polite smiles. Yet her eyes betrayed her, lingering just a second too long when I spoke, softening whenever I said her name. It was in those stolen glances that everything lived, the words we didn't dare say, the warmth we weren't supposed to feel. One late afternoon, I arrived early. The clinic was quiet, the last of her patients just leaving. She saw me waiting near the door and exhaled softly. "You shouldn't be here yet," she said, though she didn't sound angry. "I know. I just wanted to see you before the next one." She leaned against the door frame, crossing her arms. "You make it very hard to keep boundaries." "Then don't," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flickered with something: fear, longing, guilt, maybe all three. "You think this is that simple?" "No. But I think we're both pretending it's impossible when maybe it isn't." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You're young enough to believe in maybe. People my age don't." "Then teach me the difference," I said. "Because whatever this is, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels real." Her silence stretched long enough for me to hear the ticking of the wall clock. Then she whispered, "Real doesn't always mean right." For a long while, neither of us spoke. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the dull thud of my own pulse in my ears. Then she stepped closer, her voice low. "Do you know what scares me most? Not that I might fall for you, but that I already have." My breath caught. The world narrowed to the space between us, the soft scent of jasmine from her skin, the faint tremble in her hands. "Then don't run," I said. "I'm not running," she whispered. "I'm trying to survive you." Before I could reply, she turned away, walking toward the cabinet to busy herself with papers she didn't need to touch. I watched her, the woman who had become my calm, my confusion, my quiet chaos, all in one. That was when I realized the truth: love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, settling in the silence between stolen glances and half-meant goodbyes. When our session finally ended, she handed me my jacket without meeting my eyes. "Take a week off," she said. "Maybe 2. You need clarity." "We both do." I nodded, even though the thought of not seeing her made my chest ache. As I walked out into the fading dusk, I caught my reflection in the glass door, half in light, half in shadow. It looked exactly how I felt. And somewhere behind me, through the clinic's soft glow, I thought I saw her watching, her hand resting on the doorknob, her lips parted as if she wanted to call me back. But she didn't. Neither of us did. The space between us had never felt wider or more alive.